In this episode, we're thrilled to have Nicole, Nicole Vair. She's a journalist. Nicole,
Hi, Sochi. Thank you so much for having me.
my pleasure. It's really an honor. Um, Nicole is a journalist turned marketing professional whose passion for brand storytelling has led her to make a meaningful impact across multiple sectors. Currently with Envision Saint John, the regional growth agency, Nicole brings her unique storytelling approach to regional growth and community engagement. Previously, she spearheaded provincial marketing campaigns for the YMCA and Horizon Health Network. Her experience at the YMCA of Southwestern New Brunswick includes serving on the National Brand Council. You got to tell us what that is for YMCA Canada, where she contributed to shaping national narratives for the organization. Nicole's journey exemplifies the power of storytelling as a tool for connection, community impact, and organizational growth. You're welcome, Nicole.
Wow. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Thank you.
No, you did it. You did it. It's all you. It's all you.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is Brand Council? What was that?
Yeah. So Y Canada's National Brand Council, the Federation of Y Canada kind of holds the brand guidelines for all the Ys across the country. And when I was at the Y, it's been about 5 years now, but there was around 40 Y associations across Canada. I think it's less now just because some Ys have amalgamated. But basically, it was an opportunity for representatives in different parts of the country to sit around the table and share kind of their experiences with that national Y and guide different campaigns. So, for instance, I know the Y just recently launched a new campaign about like igniting potential. And so the brand council kind of would have been the brain power behind that, but bringing perspectives from different parts of the country. So it wasn't just kind of an office in Toronto making all those decisions. They would have had representatives from the different communities kind of giving their different opinions and bringing their community to the table. And then what I really enjoyed about it was a bit of a professional development thing as a young professional at the Y. I was 23 when I started at the Y. So it was a great opportunity for me to connect with marketers who had a lot more experience than me in branding, and it really made me realize the power of a brand, I guess, kind of seeing it at that national scale. So it was a great experience, and the Y serves so many different parts of the community, as you know, Sochi. So it was cool to implement that brand locally. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking about the value of multidisciplinary perspectives, and I'd like to start with your back. So coming from journalism, how has that experience shaped your your approach to storytelling in marketing?
Yeah, great question. It's funny, I say I'm a journalist turned marketer, but I worked in journalism for 6 months. So most of my career has been in marketing, but my education and everything was in journalism. I realized quickly that I didn't want to tell hard news stories. I didn't love going to like crime scenes or burning buildings and telling that. I really wanted to tell those positive, impactful stories. So I didn't last very long as a journalist, but those skills really are something I use every single day. I always like to say everyone comes from a different place and has a unique story to tell. And the skills I learned in journalism school really helped me try to pull those stories out of people. And yeah, so I started at the Y. That was kind of my first job outside of journalism as a communications coordinator. And I had so many opportunities to tell different stories, whether it was a member story about a member who got healthier from using the gym, or through strategic communications too. So we rolled out a strategic plan for the organization, and I said, okay, how do we make our staff care about this? Because a lot of times it's at senior level who's at that strategy. They know the tactics that they need to go to accomplish that plan. And we have like early childhood educators, we had fitness coaches, and I'm like, how do we engage all of our team to care about this? Because we need them like to care. And so I implemented a storytelling tactic through that to show like the work you do as a fitness coach. Like, let's tell some of those stories of those people's lives you're impacting, and how is that contributing to our health bucket of our strategic plan? And I know that's a very kind of tactical example, but I think stories can roll out in so many different ways. And I kind of go in with that story lens with every project, because I'm like showing authenticity and showing people like something real is so much more impactful than just stating we're doing this without showing that human aspect of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it
yeah.
does. It does, down to the T. But even you call it tactical. I find it, I mean, it's meaningful. I had recently had a conversation with someone who was trying to figure out. She's young and she's trying to figure out. Is communications a thing? It for me, or should I be pursuing some other aspects of marketing? So they're not necessarily the same thing. Even if across in many organizations, it's and maybe even industries, it sits different offices or in different departments. Most times communication sits in marketing departments. And, so that's why I said, giving those examples, they're not just tactical, but they're very meaningful, because you're able to demonstrate the value of storytelling. It really comes across clearly through those tactical or examples of tactical use.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think as I've grown in my career and done different things, I know you mentioned like marketing and communications, they're always kind of coupled. And a lot of times our titles, like my title even now is a marketing and communications, but it's truly, there are separate entities, but storytelling touches on both. Like, it's.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Quite interestingly, and maybe this leads even to my next question, which is, do you think storytelling changes, because you've worked across different industries now, and do you think storytelling changes with the audience and sector, but does it or doesn't it, and how does it?
Yeah, I think that the foundation of it doesn't change. Like, the goal is to show impact in a meaningful way, but I think that it can change on how it's rolled out. And I'll kind of give an example of that. So I am not like a digital marketer by trade. So I kind of bring my story experience into digital marketing to figure out how it can work. And we launched a campaign recently at Envision, and I'm sure you know a lot about it, but it was like a workforce talent attraction campaign. And so we wanted to try to reach like young people and show them why they can have career opportunities here. And for me, I'm like, how do we do this? And so it's not just us being like, look at jobs that are available, like how do we meaningfully do this? And so we brought in a storytelling tactic. I'm saying tactic, but it was a meaningful way to do it, where we reached out to young professionals in the community, many of whom moved here for work. And then, so they're growing in their career, but they're still in their 30s, so starting out building, and they chose Saint John because they found work opportunity, but they're real people living here. And we got them to tell their stories about why they're choosing to build a life here, for the lifestyle, for the work-life balance, for the growth opportunity of different sectors that we're hiring. And we had them kind of write personalized stories that we delivered via LinkedIn messages to our target audience. And so that's like a very tactical thing, like we said, but it's real. Like, it's not just a graphic with a stat, or like, we're using real people telling real stories. And I know, Sochi, we're working on an inclusivity campaign where let's show these people who are building a life here, who are from away but are choosing to call, and let's tell their stories. Like, to me, it's the most meaningful way to reach people. And I might be biased because I'm a storyteller, but like, I just feel like human connection is something we all crave and need, and so let's do that in our work to make people see why it's so important. Yeah.
So I know you went, not just went, but you actually facilitated a session at Socialist. So how was that experience?
Yeah, it was really good. I was like honored to be there. I went to Social East a few times in the past, and I had gone to different storytelling sessions, and they were amazing, but I felt like I wasn't getting anything I could kind of go implement back into my work. So my goal was to do that with my session, and I shared that LinkedIn example, and I tried to show people some tactical ways they could to share stories. As a takeaway, maybe that might be helpful. One of the biggest questions I had from that session was, how do you get people to share their stories? Which I thought was an interesting question, because in my work a lot now, I find people are like excited to talk about what they're doing, or if we're featuring a business, it's helping them too by spreading their word. But when we look at some companies, and even thinking back to my time at Horizon Health, where there might be like some personal information, or not everyone might grasp the story in a positive way, I can see why that's a challenge. And that question kind of stumped me, because I'm like, just ask. Like, most people want to, but it's not always the case too. And so something that I try to tell people that are in organizations trying to do storytelling is like, lean on your teams. So like, you and I are the storytellers, but I'm not out working with developers or entrepreneurs on a day-to-day basis, but there's people on my team who are. So they're the ones that actually know all these stories. They need to pitch them. That we almost need to have like organizational story meetings, like because I don't know what's happening in their worlds. So one of the things I shared was like, ask your colleagues, like, what is an interesting tidbit of people you're connecting with, whether that's a client through a program, or a new business that's starting up that we're helping in my world right now. But every organization has people on the ground, so use your team as like your storytelling resources. I think I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of went off there, but yeah. Yeah.
You did. I think for me, my takeaway from your response is seeing how storytelling in its true to its essence helps humanize people.
Yeah.
You know, so not just your team. That's what I'm taking away. Not just, but even how you dignify the people you serve, your clients, the audience, and just by making the offering more humane. Right? Even people who are making that offering humane, and that's what I'm taking from it. So you did answer.
Good. Okay. And I think too, Sochi, I think it's about like creating a culture of like having people who aren't in our world, who are storytellers, think about it more, because we always get tapped. I need to market this. I need to get people to attend this event, or I need to sell this product, or whatever it is, and all these different industries that people work in. But it's getting them to think, okay, how do we do that meaningfully? And in my mind, it's like tapping into the work and the people doing it, and sharing the success that's happening in whatever industry it is. And that is that humane. People want to feel good about what they're doing, and so hearing a success story sometimes leads to that. But
I want to just not really circling back, but also maybe drawing from your experience with the brand council, and in your present role with Envision Saint John. There are two different skills I can see. You're actually working at two different scales. First at a national scale, and then now you have a regional scale. But either way, they are very, very broad. They're very light, not really retail in per se. But question now is, how has that changed your view or your approach, or has it, what were your takeaways when working at those different levels? It seems as if you have to turn up the notch a bit on some, or turn it down in some other. What was that? Can you paint a picture of how your approach might change, varied with by the scale of
No, that's a really good question. And the why at that national level, like, I would say it still holds a very special place in my heart. Like, I loved that experience, and I think that they're doing like really cool work. And how has that kind of changed regionally? I'd say because I've never really been in a role where I'm like selling a consumer product, I can't really speak to like that style of storytelling. All of my experience has been in telling an impact. Like in my current job regionally, it's like, what is the impact of our organization on the community, but also what is the impact of people in our region that are doing cool things and building that place brand. And at that national level, it was like, what is the impact of the why for our country? And I think, to answer your question, is you're not always going to relate to everyone in your stories. And so that's okay. Like, I feel like if we're telling an impact story in a specific sector, just lean into that and know that a lot of people might not get it. But the people that we want to reach and want to see and connect with, focus on that. I think that's one takeaway I've had, because I think when you're starting a project, you're like, okay, we want everyone to understand this and feel from this, and it's not always gonna be the case. And I think that's something I've learned from that national level and regionally. It's just like, be authentic, be genuine, let the story tell itself and impact those who it's meant to impact. And if it's a whole other people that we're not touching, like maybe there's another story in the future that'll get them. And being okay with that. Sometimes in our jobs it's hard because we're like, no, we've got KPIs and we've got all this stuff, but like, don't change your story, or don't change other people's story to try to reach a broad audience. Like, just lean in and be real and true, I guess. Yeah.
So I'm getting hints of challenges. So let me try and hone in on that. Every sector is different, and there are challenges as well. So what are some of the hurdles that you have come up with storytelling in I know a big part of your KPIs right now has to do with place place storytelling. What are the hurdles you've had to come across while executing on that?
Great question. And I think it leads back to like that audience and being okay with maybe not reaching everyone the way you expect. I think a big challenge from that place brand perspective is we can tell an amazing story, and there's still going to be people in the community who have like a negative outlook. And as impactful as someone's story is, they can kind of tarnish it a little. We know social media can be not a fun place sometimes, and so that's a challenge that I kind of find like upsetting in our work. Is like, we're just trying to lift people up and share good things, and when you kind of have those haters online, like I'd say that's a challenge. And it's also a challenge just in like our marketing work in general, like knowing when to hide a comment versus respond to a comment. And like that's a whole other can of worms, I think. And then I think another challenge in storytelling for a job is doing justice to like people's stories. So like telling it in a way that, again, back to that authenticity, that truth, that you want them to feel like it's a privilege to tell people's stories. So you want to feel like you're doing it justice. And then even thinking back to like when I worked as a journalist, this would be another example, but I think journalism's really hard. And our media landscape's constantly like shrinking and changing. And so a challenge there was like being a journalist and abiding by those standards, but then also having people like want to see the story before it gets published and want to, and it's just like, no, like actually that's not how it works. So like from a whole news perspective, there's that lens, which I understand from being on the other side of it now, why people ask that. But that's another challenge that I think storytellers face, is like being authentic to the person, but also like knowing this is your craft, and like it's other people can't really change it either. But yeah.
How do you introduce yourself to people? What do you tell them you do?
Yeah. I always lean into that I'm a storyteller. And that I work in marketing and communications for our regional growth agency. But yeah, that's like I feel like that's a profession, and it's a skill that not everyone has. And so I think we as storytellers can own it and love it and share it. Yeah.
What would you say has recently, which campaign do you think, whether in your industry or not, or out of it, what campaign would you say you've seen that really touched you, that really resonated, like maybe checked all the boxes, or a beautifully told story, and one that you feel should and probably already does make an impact?
Oh, I'm gonna just like ponder on this. I feel like the example that first initially like came to mind is like kind of cliche, but I'm going to share it. So when I was doing research for the presentation at Social East, and I actually didn't put this in my presentation because I thought a lot of the people that were going there worked for kind of small companies like us, and so it's kind of a bigger company story. But I was doing research on different like case studies of storytelling that have worked well. And Shell, which I know is like an oil, like propane company, did a campaign a few years ago that I found in my research, where they had employees share how they were proud of the like climate action change work that was happening at Shell. And there was one story from a woman from Ireland, actually, whose father like owned a farm, and that was his living and business. And she was like, I work for Shell, and a lot of people think that it's like bad for the environment, but here's how we're fueling like my father's farm, and how I'm proud of the steps we're taking for reducing carbon emissions and all. And I like watched the way that they had portrayed it. It was a beautiful video. And she really worked there. She wasn't an actor. I was like, this is a really great story. And I didn't end up sharing it in my presentation because I didn't think it was as tangible for people who are kind of on the ground in these smaller companies. But I was like, I like believe that. And I think that they did a good job showing the authenticity and I'm sure there's so many other like local examples as well. But that was just kind of the first thing that came to mind when you asked. But it just shows how like a big company who sometimes could have some negative press is leaning into storytelling to share their positive. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind sending me
I will for sure.
Definitely be happy to share it in the show notes so people can follow them as well.
Perfect.
But it's interesting you mentioned that campaign, because now I have to ask, how do you measure? I mean, we all know storytelling is as not fickle, but as subjective as it looks. It's always tricky. It's always tricky to gauge success. But what do you look at to know if a campaign has made an impact?
I would say I always lead with I think the reason that I'm able to tell so many stories even within my role is they are the things that people click and they want. You see a familiar face, you want to learn more. And so measuring success can be as tactical as looking at your web analytics to see who's viewing the story or sharing the story. But I would also say a good way to see success from your storytelling tactics is also like chatting with your teams, back to your teams at your organizations too, and see if they have more people that are wanting to come forward and share their stories. And there's a lot of like ways that we might not be able to track numbers on paper, but anecdotally, I can't speak right now, but if we're hearing that people are like, I'd love to be part of this or speaking up, and I think that's a key of success too, especially from hearing even at Social East how teams were having a hard time. Storytellers were having a hard time getting people to share. If you start sharing and more people want to step up, I think that's a great way to measure success too. Yeah.
I agree. And for those anecdotes that you mentioned, I'm sure even internal, like you said, for internal communications especially, it's really counts. Seeing as many organizations can't really afford high tech that really captures engagement or engagement rates programmatically, and you are spot on. Are there any trends that you've noticed? Noticed storytelling that you're fascinated with?
Yeah, I think the LinkedIn conversations is an interesting way to use storytelling. Like, I know that we might get ads all the time from like MBA programs and stuff on LinkedIn. Like, that's totally different. Like, those are a different type of LinkedIn ads. But the way we used it, and of having like real St. Johners share their story to reach a very targeted audience, like, I think that's a neat trend. I think influencers are storytellers a little bit. I know it's a bit different and they might not be like trained journalists, but like, people are paying for influencers to share their brand story. And so I think that it'll be interesting to watch that and see if it continues to grow on different channels outside of TikTok, or if it's kind of like a fad. But yeah, those are two that kind of come to mind.
Could you give me one example of a case where you worked with an influencer to push or drive a story that you meant to tell on any particular brief? Maybe what?
Yeah, so I don't have a solid example directly, but I know, like, in tourism marketing, a lot of times people will work with influencers to share like an experience within the tourism market. And so all the time we might try to share stories like that show how we have great hiking and there's amazing operators around that can take you on cool excursions on your vacation. So as an organization, you share that, but then hiring an influencer to come and do those things and make it real. Again, back to that authentic, real. And although you might be engaging them in the campaign, you still within your influencer contracts, I guess this would be a good takeaway. You want them to be real too. Like, you don't want them to lie if they had a horrible time. You might not show that. Like, you might just leave it out, but like, anything you're publishing or producing is real and genuine, and that is how you're keeping that story true. So yeah,
that was a great example. So say, for instance, you have a young protege. What practical tips or advice would you give that person if they wanted to become a storyteller like you?
Great question. I think the main one is like learning and practicing to be a great listener. I think part of our role as storytellers is to just absorb the information and then take it and help craft that story. So being a great listener, this is a very generic one that most people who are watching this podcast probably know, but I always end all my interviews by asking, like, if I didn't ask anything they wanted to share. And sometimes that's where you get like your gold nugget. Because they might have something we didn't even think to ask. So that would be another thing. And then also embracing new tools that are out there to help us. So I am not the best AI user. I'd say I'm like very green. I don't know everything, but I have adopted like Otter to transcribe my interviews. It saved so much time. I used to like put headphones in and type out my whole interviews and then like look for the quotes. So like Otter is amazing. Uploading your recording, having it spit out your transcript. But then I get a little afraid of AI too, because I'm like, I don't want it to tell the story for me. So like making sure you're taking that and really digesting it from how you felt in your interview as well, and making sure that story's not being generated by a computer, but the computer's just helping you speed up the process, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I'm going to go a little bit metaphysical. Not really metaphysical. It's really practical. It's practical. It's a practical question. But in your moments of introspection, what would you say is a common thread, or shall we say the guiding principle the principle that has guided you in your career choices up to this point where you are right now? What do you think it is?
Within storytelling? Okay. I think, and it might sound cliche, and I've already said it at the beginning, but it's the fact that every single person comes from a different place and has a super unique story to tell. And so no matter where I've worked or what I've done, knowing that no two stories are going to be the same, and that there's always going to be this nugget or this cool thing that we can learn from each other, knowing that is always there has made my work very rewarding, but also like interesting. Like I've been able to apply that to like everything I've done, because I've never gone into an interview or gone into a project where I'm like, oh, this is going to be the same. Like you're going to get something different, and people are going to feel something different from each individual story you share. So I'd say that's a common thread, is that we're all unique. and there's always something new to share with people.
I love that. And in the spirit of there being something new every time, I have something new too. That's something I've learned, and I'm going to apply right here. I've learned to always now to ask, Nicole, is there any question that I have?
No, it's a good.
So is there any question that you've never been asked before, or haven't asked, that you would really like to answer or touch on?
It's hard when that question's asked to you, I will say. I think just that I'd like to encourage people, like I know you said if there was someone younger that I would like to give advice to, I'd like to encourage people to not lose sight of the power of telling stories, like, and I know I've touched on this and you've kind of asked it anyway, but it's, they can have such an impact. And okay, maybe I'll share this. So I kind of discovered that I wanted to be a storyteller when I was 13. My grandparents took me on a trip across the country, across Canada, in their RV. And I've always been like kind of an outgoing person and love meeting new people, but it was on that trip, and it was just me and my grandparents, and I was in grade 7. I got to see so many different things that I had never seen before, whether that be different cultures or different ways people live in our own country. And I just remember documenting everything. Like I would take photos of everything. My grandmother like kept a journal that would include like what the temperature was that day. And I have this whole book of this trip from like over 20 years ago now. But that experience and being open to like learning about different things outside of my little bubble made me want to be a storyteller. And so I just encourage people that although storytelling is a skill set, and like I'm proud that that's how I described like my job. We all kind of have the power to be storytellers, and encourage people to keep that open mind as they experience life, I guess.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's inspirational. And so, as promised, I
Yes.
have my rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you
I'm
ready?
ready. Yeah.
Okay. What's your go-to comfort food?
Ooh, nachos and dip. I
Ooh.
love like a good chip and dip. Yeah.
Well, what are you watching when you're eating that?
Ooh, it depends. Like I'll binge shows. I just finished Suits. I know it's an older show, but I had never watched it before. So I just got through Suits. So that's what I would have been watching recently.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh my goodness. I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. Probably Amelia Earhart. And I know that that's like a random answer, but when I was in grade, like middle school, again, I feel like that was a very Amelia. Yeah. She is the first woman to fly a plane.
Oh,
yeah. And so when I was in middle school, I did a like speech about her, and I just found her very fascinating. So I think it would be cool to actually get to know her. Yeah.
Interesting women.
Yeah.
Beach or mountain?
Ooh, depends on the day. Today, I'm going to say mountain because I want like a hiking adventure. But if I was like very stressed out, I'd probably say beach to relax. Yeah.
Favorite book that impacted your life?
Oh my gosh, that's really hard too. I know I'm not good at these like rapid things, obviously. Oh. The Shack? I can't even remember who it's by, but it's
Young. Not Andrew Young. It's but
yeah. It's about like a bunch of people who all are like godly that live. Yeah. It's very interesting, and there's a movie about it too.
Yes,
so yeah.
What's a skill you've always wanted to learn but haven't had the chance to yet?
Ooh. I'd like to learn a new language. One of my biggest regrets is not taking French in school. I mean, I'm happy in the sense that I feel like I'm strong in English, and it's probably made me a stronger writer and all that. But I didn't go through the New Brunswick French immersion program. So but I don't necessarily even want to learn French. Like I think Spanish is interesting from traveling. Whenever I'm in a different country, I want to be able to speak their language. So that would be, yeah.
Nicole, this has been a pleasure, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your experience.
Oh my gosh, Sochi, thank you. This is really fun.
I know I still work with you. But now knowing that, I can actually throw some Suits references would make meetings more interesting.
Yes, exactly.
That's a good one I'm taking away from,
Oh, good. No, and I just want to say thank you too. I think this is really cool what you're doing. I love when people kind of take their passion and elevate it for other people to experience it and share. So thank you for taking your time and chatting with people about this very interesting topic.
It's my pleasure. It's my honor. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thanks, Sochi. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.